So personally for me, my parents not at all involved in politics or global affairs. My mom is in insurance, she's a corporate compliance director for Farm Bureau Corporate, and my dad did agribusiness for the longest time, not international agribusiness, and my sister is recently come into the world of IR. So I had no idea this had existed. We actually hosted an exchange student my junior year, sophomore year of high school. Didn't even register that it was something you could do, that you could get a career abroad, that you could do something in Iowa that dealt with international relations. Until I was actually a junior in high school and went to Girls State or Boys State. I went to Girls State. Has anyone here been to Girls State or Boys State? Oh. All right, well, Dr. Catherine Cove speaks at Girls State every year, and she's a former, she's currently retired Foreign Service officer. She was one of the 2 women in the Iranian hostage crisis in the 80s. Phenomenal woman. If you ever had a chance to hear her speak, take it. She's amazing to hear. She's absolutely inspiring. So I had a chance to hear her speak back when I was a junior and was just blown away. Like someone from Iowa who had a theater background, I mean, she studied theater as her BA, could go into something like that and then end up in Iran and have world-renowned recognition. She's just phenomenal. And so I think that really just hit home where you could do something you never even planned to do. So from there, I ended up going to UNI and majoring in political communication. And then we didn't have an IR program actually, like I don't know how old yours is. Anyone know? I know. Okay. UNI just added theirs about 2 years ago, and I actually worked with my professor, who's the advisor, on kind of structuring it and restructuring it and making it work because of budgetary cuts, which I'm sure you guys are very familiar with. And then Iowa State also just started theirs. So it's all very, very new, and was able to add that on at kind of the last minute and very much formulate what would be my new career. But actually, I wouldn't have even come to that if it hadn't been for the Model United Nations program, which is actually partially housed in the Iowa United Nations Association, with which Yushar is with. But the Iowa UNA, a long time back, I want to say almost 50 years now, started the Iowa High School Model UN program. Did anyone do Model UN in high school? Did anyone wish their high school had Model UN? Okay, I didn't, to be quite honest. But I love Model UN. And so I actually led the program for the state of Iowa. So we have collectively about 500 high school students from Iowa, Wisconsin. We used to have some from Nebraska. They've cut most of their programs, lack of funding. And then also from Hurstville, Missouri, who come to Iowa twice a year, and they do the Model United Nations. In the spring, it's actually the UN. In the fall, it's structured to be US delegates, which is really interesting. A lot of schools don't do that. There's not a student congress type element to it, but it's very much the middle ground between I don't know if you know anything about policy debate and like IE debate, but it exists external to itself as a Congress, but this is a whole different beast. And so it's very interesting, and especially moving from something that wasn't even related to that at all to leading this program, I got a crash course pretty fast in international relations and learning about the importance of global relations and then how that reflects on every single part of your education. So knowing how that applies to policy, how it applies to agribusiness, which is what I was partially studying as well. So really all over the board, global careers apply to everything. So that's kind of my general inspiration. I also worked at the Finance Authority for a while in Des Moines, managing parts of the Iowa Jobs program. I don't know if anyone remembers that, but back in 2010, Culver had a huge push to revamp parts of Iowa's infrastructure, and so I was the intern for that with the board, managing about $186 million, which was awesome, but not at all where I am now. So obviously things change. And then actually ended up with the World Food Prize 2 summers ago, running their Global Youth Institute, which was an amazing opportunity. I would recommend the World Food Prize as a career source or as an internship for anyone here who is interested in that. They do an awesome job getting you involved at a ground level, and they really let their interns take a lot of responsibility on. Anyway, so I think that really enriched my interest into the whole sphere. But what I do here at the Iowa International Center is very much a different sort of IR. So we think of IR at a level of policy, usually. You don't really get into the nitty-gritty of how it applies to the state of Iowa. Well, if you think about it, there's a huge immigrant refugee population in the state. Huge. In Des Moines, we have a very, very large Burmese community. We have an enormous Somali-speaking population, huge Arabic speaking population, and obviously I think the current statistic I heard was that like 1 in 4 students in the Des Moines School District is Latino. So you have this very broad source of people in Des Moines who need interpreters and translators. Didn't even cross my mind that that was a career in Des Moines. Turns out it is, and I got a call one day from their executive director. I had just graduated and out of school maybe like 2 months, and she said, hey, do you want to do this? I just had a resignation submitted to me, and I know you, I've met you, I think you're phenomenal. And I was like, well, thanks, that's really sweet. And ended up there. And so right now, as you said, I manage about 120 interpreters and translators. Now they're all over the board. I have people who have been interpreting for 20 years. So those people who have their advanced certifications. I actually have the most highly certified Spanish interpreter in the state for medical professions that works for me. She's amazing, she's from Panama, and I adore having her on staff. I also have highly certified court interpreters. Conversely, if you think of the Burmese population, many of those people have lived in camps, all in different parts of South Asia most of their life. They don't have a standardized education to begin with, let alone a professional interpretation background. But there is a place for them in Des Moines, especially when it comes to interpreting, because those people need interpreters as well. So I got to negotiate that. I run a lot of the ethical trainings we do for interpreters and translators, because they're, and I don't know if anyone here is studying interpreting or translating. Anybody? I know you're looking into it. So there are a lot of ethical parameters that go into interpreting that you have to negotiate. There's a lot of just general administrative things you have to think about that we wouldn't otherwise think about. In fact, part of my job is working with new clients and getting them to realize the implications that certain interpreting staff have. It used to be in Des Moines, not 5 years ago, that you could go into a doctor's office and need a Spanish-speaking interpreter, and they would just pull anyone in the office who spoke Spanish. It's not really how it works, and there are a lot of legal parameters, and there's a lot of liability that goes into that. In fact, with the new healthcare legislation that's coming down, it's going to become a bigger topic for the interpreting world, which I'm really excited about. And also a little bit scared about because it makes my job a little bit more difficult. But that's kind of where I live, and every day is totally different. My second day on the job, I had a gentleman who had been posted in Eritrea. Does anyone know where Eritrea is? All right, so Eritrea is near Ethiopia, and does anyone know what the main languages in Eritrea are? All right, it's Arabic and Tigrinya. Now, up until this point in my life, I didn't know what Tigrinya was, let alone that there was a population of millions that spoke Tigrinya. So this gentleman walks in the door, and he was posted in the 60s in Eritrea. Eritrea is a country with a huge Italian population. It's kind of like a little Italy because of the huge Italian population there when they were colonized. And so he'd been stationed there following the Ethiopian, I guess, liberation. Or I don't know a lot about the Ethiopian background. Ask Ambassador McMullen. But he walks in and he has these scrolls. Like we're talking scrolls. They're falling apart and they have artwork and very obviously Christian artwork and typography, and I'm just like, well, what do I do with this? And he said, well, I want these translated. And I said, that's not, we do that here, but it's not something that we get on a normal basis. But I learned very quickly that there's no normal in interpretation and translation services. And the moral of the story here is that I didn't actually have a chance to translate them for him because turns out that what we think is one language is not one language, and there are a plethora of languages across the world. This was actually Ge'ez, which is a dead language only used by the Coptic Christian Church in Ethiopia. So, one of the things you learn, things that you never thought, but maybe you do well on Jeopardy someday. And so that's just one thing that happens on a day-to-day basis. Most of the time I'm working with the medical facilities across the central Des Moines area, the court systems. We do Polk County, Dallas County, Lynn County, Marshall County. We're actually working on some DHS work in the coming days. We do everything with Des Moines Department of Human Rights. We do the Des Moines DART bus system, which is DART. We do all their translation for all their marketing. Actually, we just did a fair housing commercial. Sometimes I become a talent agency. I've actually done it a couple times where they want people who speak a different language to be on TV, and I'm the one that gets the call. So it really becomes a clearinghouse for things. When your title is the Iowa International Center, the world is your oyster. You get lots of phone calls. And so beyond that, I work with Principal Financial on big translations when they move abroad. I work on smaller corporations as they try and expand into Southeast Asian markets. All across the board, you name it, I've done it, and I've been there 7 months. But beyond that, There are a whole bunch of different things we do at the Iowa International Center, and fortunately, I have amazing staff members to work with. We do about 4 key areas, so mine is just one, and then there's the International Visitor Leadership Program, which we abbreviate as the IVLP program. It's a lot shorter. IVLP is through the State Department. There's also something called Community Connections, which is through USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Aid and Development, both out of DC, obviously, and both global programs. Very cool. We actually have an intern that works with both of my program and then her program. So IVLP is a very complex beast. The way it works from start to finish is in a foreign embassy abroad. So say you're in the embassy in Eritrea. Eritrea will get a whole grouping of different application people that say you work for a tiny nonprofit in Eritrea and you're just doing amazing things to, I don't know, does anyone know what the problems are in Eritrea right now? Let's just say they're working with human rights. So you're doing awesome things with human rights in Eritrea. You might get a call from the U.S. Embassy. They'll start processing your paperwork as a nomination to go to the United States and study for 3 weeks. At that point, your nomination goes to a panel within it. I think they're called the nominating panel, and they're within the public diplomacy group of the State Department and the embassy. So they get hundreds of applications in for probably like 3 positions. And obviously, it kind of goes without saying, these positions and the country's designations, as well as the themes for the topic areas, are entirely based on U.S. foreign policy. So if the United States thinks that a certain area of the world needs to come to the United States and learn about the United States, so say we have a lot of Middle East programs that are focused on democracy promotion and civic engagement in democracy, highly structured on something the U.S. is interested in right now. So we'll say we get to take 7 people from that country, the entire country, to come to the United States for 3 weeks. And they prioritize based on that. Things can change, people get pushed off, so if you were studying museum curation, the likelihood of your program happening in 2013 is very small, but if you're studying civic engagement, it's a lot higher. That's kind of how it floats. So once those all get sifted out, they end up at the State Department in DC. DC then goes back through them again and assigns programs. They find a national program agency. Now, a national program agency is beyond the scope of the U.S. State Department. They exist externally, and what they do there is work through everything, create programs, and then send them out to CIVs. Now, the Iowa International Center is a CIV, and that's where we live. We're a Center for International Visitors. You actually have one here in Iowa City, and Iowa is privileged to have 2, one in Des Moines and one in Iowa City. So CIVs across the state, across the country, will bid on programs, and where they end up is largely based on the resources you have. So Des Moines in general, we cover a lot of different things. We have Harkin in our state, so Des Moines gets a lot of disabilities programs. We get a lot of LGBT groups, we get a lot of civic engagement, especially during the caucuses or political years. We get a lot of groups on just general civic engagement beyond the political process, and just all over the board. You name it, Des Moines will have it in our purview. It's really great. I adore working with these programs. Right now we have something like 4 programs coming in, which is a lot for one person to handle. But some people come in from all over the world. We have an Iraqi group in right now, and then another group coming in from Denmark. So that's kind of what happens. And what we do on our end is arrange programs, huge agendas, so they can meet with legislators. They can meet with Terry Branson in the morning and finish with some super liberal entity out in Iowa City. I mean, and we try and do our best to balance things out. You never want to give someone a straight picture. You want a broad picture. You want to know that if someone's coming to Iowa to study LGBT issues, that they meet with both Bob Vanderplaats and Mike McCoy in Des Moines. So it's very much the broad scope, and that's what the State Department wants. They want to give an honest opinion of what the country looks like to the visitors. So that's that. Beyond that, we also do the Iowa Global Connect. I've got books over there. We publish in 6 languages and then about 60 languages online for the international community in Des Moines. It kind of does a breakdown of everything from how to write a check to how to open a bank account or get a driver's license. All over the board, we also do ESL program classes for the Des Moines community. I think we have 30 people right now enrolled at one of the apartment complexes, which is our pilot opportunity. We're working with the legislature to expand it and expand DMAC scope. And then lastly, we do educational programs like through Pioneer DuPont.